Hello, welcome to the second video tutorial of the 3D class. In this section, we are going to model a very simple chair, one that looks like this one, which we are going to use in the rendering of the recreation of the artwork 1 and 3 chair, which is iconic early artwork of conceptual art movement. So as you can see, this chair is very simple. It only consists of a few sort of cubical elements. So let's begin. So once we open up Blender, we have this default cube. We are just going to use it. And of course, if you delete it, you can still create your own cube by going to the Add menu here, and then Mesh, and then Cube, or you press Shift A to add a cube. And now let's press S to shrink it down on the Z direction. So we press S and then Z to make it thinner on the Z direction. Now, if you want to resize it very precisely, you have the options here. If you see this is the object tag on the right side, you have the option of putting in a very precise number here. For example, you can type 0.07, and here we have a thin plate, which we are going to use it to make the seating area, this plate of the chair, and then we're just going to extrude the legs and the backs out from this part. Okay. Also, how do you tell in the 3D space, right? The positive and negative directions. You can look at this gizmo here. So with the solid line, it indicates the positive direction. So, for example, this way is the upward direction, positive Z, and then on the to the right it's the positive X, and then to this is the positive Y. So you can tell by looking at this gizmo if you get lost in the 3D space. Okay, so now we are going to use the shortcut on the keyboard tab, the tab key, which is to the left of the Q, right? Hit the tab key. You can change the mode from previously the object mode now to edit mode, and you press tab again. You can switch back and forth, like that. You press the tab key on the keyboard to switch it to edit mode. And now we are going to use a tool here on the left side called a loop cut. But here I suggest that you use the shortcut, because when using this tool here, the sequence of operation will change slightly. So I suggest that you don't click here. You just click back to the selection tool here. And now you press the shortcut, which is Control R. You can also see the shortcuts here. If you hover your mouse, you see it's Control R. So now we press Control R, and if you hover your mouse along the edge of the cube, you see that this yellow line appeared. This indicates where we will make this cut. Okay, so if I turn it this direction and Control R, you can see here. So now, without pressing any key, you want to roll your middle mouse wheel to increase or decrease the number of cuts. So the middle mouse wheel, when you scroll it, it will change the number of cuts you will be making. So we want to make 2 cuts here on this side. Now press the left mouse button to fix the cut. Now in the next stage, you'll be able to move the cuts in one direction or another, like this. But since we want the cuts to be center, we don't want to move it like this. So we just press the right mouse button to cancel this operation. So we don't want to move it. We just press the right mouse button to cancel it. And now we have a chance to scale these cuts. So we press S on the keyboard to shrink it down or to enlarge it. But we want to move the cuts to be further away from each other, right? So along the X direction. So we press X on the keyboard to move it further away from each other or closer away from each other, like this. Okay, so we want to move it somewhat closer to the side, like that. So now we press the left mouse button to fix the movement or the scale. Okay, so now before you pressing any other keys, take a look at the bottom left corner. You will see a tiny little menu appear here. If you click on this menu again, you still have one more chance to edit the scale that you just changed. So right now you can type in a precise number if you want. For example, 2.6. Okay, so now I think this looks okay. Yeah, so you can still change the number here. And now we want to make another 2 cuts on this direction, along this direction. So we have a little square on each of the corner in order to extrude the legs. So we will repeat this operation. So we press Ctrl R on the keyboard and we hover our mouse on this side. Then we see a new yellow line, and then we scroll the middle mouse wheel upwards to increase the cuts. And then we press the left mouse button to fix the cuts. And we press the right mouse button here when we are going to move it. We don't need to move it, so we press right mouse button to cancel this operation. Now we have a chance to scale it like that. But we only want to this time scale it along the Y direction in order to move them apart from each other. So we press Y. Now we can move them along the Y axis. So now we move it somewhere around here, and we press the left mouse button to fix this change. And then if we want, we can type in again the precise number 2.6. You can type in other numbers, of course. It's just up to you. You don't need to make the exact same chair as mine. Okay. So always remember, like in the previous sequence of operations, it's always you use the left mouse button to fix the change, to confirm the change, or you use the right mouse button to cancel the changes or to cancel the operation. Okay. So now we have all of these cuts. So now we are in edit mode. I should mention here, if you look at the 3 squares on the right side of the edit mode, you'll see that you can actually change the selection models here. So this one is to select the vertex, this one to select the edges, then this one to select the faces. So if I'm in the vertex selection mode, I can select these individual vertices, but I cannot select other things like the edge or the face. If I'm on the edge selection mode, I can select the edges. And if I select all the 4 edges around the face, then it will also looks like I'm selecting the entire face. And you can actually use this technique to change the selection. So for example, if I select this, hold down Shift and then select all of these 4 edges, now it appears to be selecting the entire face. Now I can just change the selection mode to the face mode. Now it seems like it will automatically change to selecting this face. And if I change to select vertices, it will select these 4 vertices. So there's also a shortcuts for these. There are also shortcuts. For example, you can press 1 and 2 and 3 to change the selection mode here. So 1 is for vertex, 2 is for edges, and 3 is for faces. Okay, 1, 2, 3 on the keyboard. Pretty simple to remember. So now let's press 3 to change our selection mode to select faces. So now I can select, hold down Shift. But before you select, actually make sure you are selecting the bottom corners, the bottom faces. So look at here, you want to be looking upwards because you want to select the 4 faces around the corners to extrude the legs from them. So extrusion, as I mentioned in class, it's one of the most common operations or functions in 3D modeling. So extrusion basically is allows you to make a copy of this face and then pull it down, and by pulling it down, it will create new polygons along the way. So let's select all of these four faces, and then the extrude function is here. Most of the common functions you can find on the left toolbar. This function says extrude region, and the shortcuts, as you can see, is the E key, the first letter of the word extrude, the E key. So as I suggested before, the same goes here. Let's try always using shortcuts if you can remember them, rather than click on the tools here, okay? Because they might have slightly different orders of operation. So let's, without pressing it, let's just go back to the 3D scene and press E on the keyboard. Now, if you move your mouse up and down, you'll see that you're now extruding the legs out, and you can change their length. And once you're done, once you're happy with their length, you can press the left mouse key to fix its length, like that. And of course, a new menu will pop up from the bottom left corner, and you have another chance to change its length by typing in the precise number. But I don't need to do that now. So now we have the four legs of the chair. And of course, if you press your left mouse button, you will see that that menu will be gone. And now if you still want to change their length, you can still do that, right? You can simply select, let's maybe select go to the vertex selection mode. So press 1 on the keyboard to go to vertex selection mode. And you want to select all of these vertices on the bottom of the leg. And now you can press G on the keyboard to move them like that. And you just want to move them up and down. So you press Z on the keyboard to move them up and down. So now you can still change the length of the chair's legs, right? And remember, most of our previously mentioned operations like rotation, movement, and scale, they all work for these individual components like vertices and edges and faces. So for example, I can, of course, rotate these vertices if I want to, or I can scale them like that, right? And if you don't want to do that, you just press the right mouse button to cancel the operation, right? Of course, I can also just select these four. For example, if I want to make a chair with a strange shapes, I can select these four and I can maybe scale them like that. And then I can maybe select these four and then rotate them along the z-axis like that, slightly, right? So if you want to make some strange shapes, you can of course manipulate these components individually. But I don't want to do that here, so I just press Ctrl Z to undo. Okay, now once we have the legs now, we can continue to make the back of the chair using the same technique. So we just press 3 on the keyboard to make sure we are going to select the faces, like so. And I can select maybe, I think these two. And then I will press E on the keyboard to extrude them upwards, like that. And this will be the two pillars of the chair, the back of the chair. Okay. So now we have the basic structure of the chair, and now we maybe want to make the connecting parts between them. So to do that, actually we probably need a few more extrusions, so we have more segments on this parts. Of course, we can again use the loop cuts to make these cuts, but that will be a little bit cumbersome. Actually, we can just keep extruding, since we're already extruding anyway. We can keep pressing. We can press E again. We can extrude another part, and then press left mouse button to fix it. And then I press E again to extrude another part, slightly longer. and press left mouse button to fix the length, and then press E again, and then a little bit up, and then left mouse button, and then E again, and then this tie just a little bit like that, and press left mouse button again. So I hope you see what I'm doing. Should be pretty simple. It just keeps extruding up to create a few more segments on the back so that we can bridge them later. So now we are going to use a new tool called bridging. As you can see, we want to make a horizontal connection between these two pillars of the back. You might think, why don't we just simply select this face and then extrude it and then just move it this way? But as you can see, if I move it here, it's actually they will never be able to truly connect because there will always be these few sort of this face and then these four vertices. It will never become one single parts. So the extrusion here won't work. So what we need to do is actually use a new function. So let's select this face and then this face. Hold down Shift on the keyboard to select both faces which are facing each other. And now let's press the right mouse button. A new window will pop up showing a few more functions. This time we want to use the function called bridge faces, and it's a very convenient tool for us to immediately create a bridge or a connection between these two faces. Okay, as simple as this. So now we can continue move down here and let's bridge these two as well. So hold down Shift and select both of them, and then right mouse button, and then bridge faces. Okay, so that's a very, very quick and easy operation. Now we have the connecting parts of the back. So let's do the same for the legs because we also need to reinforce them with these horizontal pieces. So let's select, hold down Shift, and then select all of the bottom faces. Okay, and then press E to extrude them downwards a little bit more like that. And then left mouse button to fix it, and then to press E again, and this time a little longer like that. And then left mouse button to confirm it again. So now we have some new sections for us to make the bridge. But here, we want to do something slightly different. So pay attention, please. So we are not going to simply bridge these faces because as you remember, if you have seen one of these, a chair like one of these before, you probably noticed that the connecting parts may not be as wide as the legs themselves, right? So maybe the horizontal part is slightly thinner, like a slightly thinner piece of wood. So to do that, we will be introducing a new tool called Inset. Okay, and you can see that on the left toolbar as well, called Inset Faces. And what it does is it will make a copy of the face and then shrink it down or enlarge it. So let's take a look. Here I want to demonstrate actually using a new piece of cube. So you don't need to follow me here. I just wanted to show you something really quickly. So you don't need to follow me in this part. So let me press Tab on the keyboard to change back to object mode. I just press Tab to change back to object mode. And then I just press Shift A to bring up the Add menu. And then I'm going to add a new cube and then just move it to the side. So let me demonstrate the Inset tool here first. So I press Tab on this new cube. I have a new cube. I press Tab. Now I select this this face. Okay. So the Inset tool. So if I simply extrude this face by pressing E, I can of course extrude it like this, right? But it will always be the same width of the original cube. If I keep extruding, it will always be the same width, right? But what if I want to make something that's a little bit thinner, or to make a new kind of structure? Later on, I will show you. Then we need to use the inset tool. So I press I, the shortcut for the inset tool, as you can see here, is I. So I press I, and now this is the inset tool. As you can see, it makes a new face on this plane, and then you can slightly shrink it down. And once we have this, you'll see if I extrude this face upwards, then we have an extrusion of a different size, right? So now I can have a structure like this. So for example, if you want to make some kind of a chimney or some kind of building, maybe the top of the building is slightly smaller than the rest of the building, then you can use this inset tool. And also what is good, you can also use it to make extrusions that's going downwards, not just upwards. For example, I press I to inset this face like that, right? And when I extrude, of course, I can move it down, but now I can also move it, I can move it up, but I can also move it downward as well, like that. So now I have a swimming pool on top of the building, right? If you fill it with water, you now have a swimming pool. Okay, great. So that's the inset tool. But if you remember, when we see this inset tool here on this cube, the insertion, right, the inset is always of the similar width, like the same width, right? It's pretty equal. But here, if I go back to my chair, and if I go back to my chair, I need to press the Tab key to go back to object mode in order to select different objects. And then I will select this chair, and then press the Tab key again to go to edit mode. And now I select this face. So as you can see, if I select this face, and if I press F to zoom in, and now let's see, if I press I on the keyboard and trying to inset it, you see that the part where I'm insetting it, the width isn't equal at all. It's not. It doesn't look so even. In fact, it's actually really distorted. You can see this width is so thin, and then this part is so wide, right? So it's not a perfect insertion as we previously seen on this square here. So what happens here, and this is has to do with actually the scale of the whole object. So if we come back to this object tab on the right side, we can take a look at the transform of the entire chair. So now we can see the scale. It's 1, 1, but then here on the z direction, it becomes 0.07. And remember, that's what we changed at the beginning, right? So we first had a cube, and then we shrink it down on the z direction in order to make a thin plate, right? So this is where what we changed it, and it actually has an effect on the later the entire model that we are making. And so in order to fix this problem, we can do an operation called applying the transforms, which set the current value as the default value for the software, which means it will ask the software to recognize that the current transform, whatever it is, whatever numbers you change here, you want the software to recognize that as the default value for this object. So to do that, let's go back to object mode by pressing down Tab, Tab, and then select this chair and go to Object, Apply, and we want to apply Scale. Okay. So now, once we hit Apply Scale, you can see if we come back to the transform here, you can see that all of its scale becomes 1, 1, and 1, but the shape of the chair didn't change. So that's how we set the current value to become the default value for this object. So now we can press Tab and go back to the edit mode. And now if I insert this face, you'll see that it will have a much better look. So if I press I on the keyboard, Now you can see when I inset it, it looks pretty nice now with a pretty equal proportion of the inset part. Okay, so but now I want to inset all of the faces together in order to have them all of equal size. So I just press right mouse button to cancel that for now. And then I want to select these two faces and perhaps also these two, because I know they should all be equal size. Now I press I on the keyboard, and then I shrink it down slightly. I insert them slightly like that, and I press the left mouse button. Now I have all of the four faces being inserted like that. And now I can start bridging these individual legs. So I select this smaller face here, and then I hold down Shift, and then I select this one, and I right click and bridge faces. So now I have a smaller bridge, which is not as wide as the legs themselves, which sometimes look more interesting as an interesting little details here that you can add, right? So here the same, I select this face and then this face, and I right click and bridge faces. So you can do the same for the connection that's in this direction. So for example, you can hold down Shift and then select all of these four faces, and you press I on the keyboard to insert them like that. Maybe you can make it smaller or larger because sometimes they will have these variations, right? So maybe here I just make a somewhat I'll make them all looking pretty equal like that. And now I can simply select these two, which are facing each other, hold down Shift, and then right click and bridge faces. Here's the same. I select these two facing each other, and then I right click and bridge faces. Okay, so that's a very quick process, relatively simple. Now I have made a pretty simple looking chair, but of course it's extremely uncomfortable, right? But we can maybe later on make some more variation to it based on your own taste and see if you can make some good changes to it. But one more thing I wanted to ask you to do before we finish this chair. So part of the reason why this chair looks so uncomfortable, first of all, is of course, the back is so straight up, right? So it's hard to lean on it. But also, take a look at the edges, right? They're all so sharp, so thin, so sharp, right? And almost like if you put your legs here, it will cut your leg, right? It can really hurt your skin. And the corners are really sharp as well. So in order to make them look a little bit rounded, we can use a new type of operations here. So let's press Tab on the keyboard, go back to object mode. Now we're selecting the entire chair rather than the individual components. So let's take a look at on the right side again. You see here there's a little wrench icon. If you hover your mouse on it, it says modifier. Let's click on this. This is a panel that let us add modifiers to different objects in the scene. And modifiers are simply some sort of a non-destructive operations that you can add to the objects. So what does that mean? So for example, the previous operation that we did, like extrusions, all of them, they first of all happens on the component level, right? So they're not on the whole objects, but instead they are happening on each component. I have to press Tab and go into edit mode in order to use these functions like extrusions, right? And also these functions, like extrusion, once you fix them, once you confirm them, they're there. They're always there. And unless you undo, you have no other ways to change them later on, right? You cannot say, oh, I don't like it. Maybe I just find some way to cancel it. You cannot do that anymore after a little bit longer if you run out of the undo history. So let's press tab to go back to object mode. But modifier here are actually non-destructive. So if you add a modifier and it makes some changes to your objects, and as long as you haven't applied or confirmed those modifiers, you can always change your mind later and go back and say, I don't like the effects of this modifier. I can cancel it or delete it. So let's try one now on this chair. Let's select the chair and then add modifier. And then let's add one called Bevel. So it's here, called a Bevel modifier. So after we apply the bevel operation, now the chair appeared to have no change at all. And I think sometimes that was a glitch. And to fix that, there are maybe some issues with the chair. To fix that, let's press tab again on the keyboard, and then go into the edit mode, right? Press tab, and then we want to press A to select all of its components. So A for all. You can press A to select all of the faces here. And now if we go to mesh and go to clean up, and we can actually use a function called merge by distance. And what that does is it checks all the duplicates, vertices or edges or faces that are overlapping with each other in space. So maybe there are two vertices sharing the exact same coordinate. So it looks like there's just one, but there are actually two or even more overlapping with each other. So this step will clean up those extra polygons. So let's try this one. And now you can see that there's a little menu pop-up on the bottom left, indicating how large of a distance can be used as the threshold to merging these extra overlapping components. So I think the default value should be good for cleanup purposes. So now once we do that, and then we press tab again on to go back to the object mode, now we see this bevel modifier will be taking effects now. So if I just delete it, you'll see, we go back to the original sharp edges. Now, if I add modifier and then I add the bevel tool, the bevel modifier, now you see we have some extra details along all the edges. And you can increase the segments here, for example, to 3. And now you see you have some slightly more edges, more segments on the edges, and then you'll have more details and they look kind of softer and more rounded. And now we have a much nicer looking chair. Okay, so this is the end of today's tutorial.